you're feeling really crummy, you want to get in bed, put the duvet over your head, how can we get out of that rut?
So I have two responses. One is JFDI, just fucking do it. Love. I'm Julia Samuel. I'm a psychotherapist, an author and a podcaster. Anticipatory grief is at that moment you hear bad news, whether it's a health diagnosis or an end of a relationship, that your life in that moment changes and you grieve for your present and the future that you expected. Often grief is only associated with death, but actually we need to legitimise our feelings of anticipatory grief and grief from living losses. So often when we hear bad news, we want to stop the pain. And so we block it with denial, busyness, and actually the pain is the agent of change. Emotions are transmitters of information to tell us something is up and learn that the news is going to affect us so that we can support ourselves through it. When we block it, we do ourselves harm. Hi, Fearne.
Take a seat. Julia, are there certain coping strategies that we can use to help ourselves with anticipatory grief?
There are lots of coping strategies that help us. First of all is to not turn away from it. So we need to develop ways of turning towards the pain where we can have loss orientation, where we can emote and grieve and feel our sadness and our fury, and turn away from it, where we can be restorative, where we can have hope, where we can engage in our day, where we can be grateful for what we do have. Because when we block it, we often then don't address a lot of the important things that need to be addressed.
How else can it be detrimental to suppress grief or to suppress any of the emotions around a situation like this?
So research shows that 15% of all psychological disorders come from unresolved grief. So your anticipatory grief, the bad news that maybe your health diagnosis or that you've broken up a relationship, may be on pre-existing losses. We have enormous capacity to live and engage with life when we face the reality of what we're facing. So it's by allowing ourselves to feel that pain that we are healed, that is the curative part of grief.
And it's scary to feel pain. No one wants to feel pain, but that's the better option, to feel it and to let it move through you.
So one of the kind of strongest emotions with anticipatory grief is fear. Like, I don't know, and you kind of look to this unknown future that looks very frightening. And what helps us manage that is exercise. It's not very sexy, but moving your body tells your body that you've flown, so it lowers your cortisol. And doing a combination of even if going outside for 10 minutes, coming back and do any kind of breathing exercise for 5 minutes, maybe journaling for a few minutes, that combination has a buy one, get one free effect, because you really feel much more centered and emotionally available then to make good decisions and manage what is coming down the road at you.
Which is often the last thing you want to do, I guess. If you're feeling really crummy, you want to get in bed, put the duvet over your head,
have a coffee,
shut the world out and have a coffee. But actually, you've got to push past that. Is there any advice on doing so? People feel so stuck in, I don't want to move, I don't want to see other humans. How can we get out of that rut?
So I have two responses. One is JFDI, just fucking do it. Love. And the other one is make them snacks. So little bite size. Go outside for 5 minutes. Make the barrier to resistance very low.
Yes.
Then you can build up and it doesn't become this huge thing that you have to face.
Julia, of course, grief doesn't just mean death. There's all types of flavours of grief. Can you talk about some of them? Because I think a lot of the time we're going through very painful things without recognising that we're grieving.
I think that's so important. So it's what I call living losses. And it has all the emotions of grief, but it isn't death. It could be the end of a relationship. It could be we lose our job. And the level of the grief is equal to the level of the emotional investment in the end. So if it's a very significant relationship and it's a divorce, so a divorce of someone who you really believe was the love of your life, really feels like grief. And I think often divorce, because it is so common, the grief isn't legitimised. It's like, oh, it's just another thing. But actually, it's a whole grieving process of who am I now? I'm not a wife, I'm not a husband, you're not a family as you were. So you grieve for all the future that you expected, as well as the present that you're kind of dealing with.
And you've got to let yourself do it. Because I think, again, a lot of us just sort of try and push through and soldier on big losses, friendship losses, job losses, whatever, and think, that's ridiculous. I need to just get over myself. But actually, the healthier thing is to grieve.
And that shitty committee, that kind of self.
I love that. Honestly, I'm going to use that all day. Shitty committee, that is in my head all day long.
Yeah. And they have different people, right?
Yes, they're horrible. It's a really like awful committee of tyrants.
Yes. So that shitty committee can really take you out, and then you really turn against yourself.
Yep.
What's so cruel in grief is that you turn against yourself when what you need most is your self-compassion.
Where does gratitude come into the equation here? Some people might feel like there's no place for gratitude when there's really, really dark, heavy news about.
I think, again, it's the protective factor of feeling the pain of the bad news, but also that highlights life. You know, you never know how precious life is more than when you think you or someone you love is going to die. And then you can feel enormously grateful for things that you sort of ignored or took for granted. And gratitude, as in all the sort of positive behaviors like exercise and sleep and regulating your system, has a lowering of stress, which is good for your mind, good for your immune system, lowers inflammation. So it is good for your outcome. So it has a physiological effect as well as a psychological one.
Julia, I've got some community questions here from our lovely Happy Place gang. Someone here says, how do I get this under control? I should be grateful, but the anxiety creeps in. So looking against that gratitude we talked about earlier, the gratitude for the small moments could be for our connections, that's seemingly being really overshadowed by this person's anxiety. How can they get a better balance?
So the fact that she's aware of her anxiety is in of itself helpful. Where she puts her attention is where she gets her outcome. So choosing to do things that take her out of herself, exercise, being outside, doing fun things, and doing that intentionally as a sort of self-soothing exercise is really helpful. The other thing is I have an image I use with people, which is a television screen. So if you picture the television screen and you put the image that you're anxious about on the screen, then take a breath, change the channel, put an image on that you like, a beach or someone you love, and then move your attention away. Every time you do that, your mind likes prediction, so it'll do it for you. So it'll stop you spiraling.
Next question. My dog has been my best friend for 14 years. It's breaking my heart that I'm going to lose her. Any advice?
Our dogs can be the centre of our universe because they don't judge us. They don't lose their shit with us.
Unconditional love.
So I think the first thing is to really legitimise her loss and how important it is. I think make memories. So take photos, videos, spend time with your dog. Let other people know that you feel really sad. Don't hide it in the sense of shame that I'm ridiculous loving my dog so much. I think arts are very underestimated. Listening to music, seeing things, they feed our soul. And then that gives us the emotional wherewithal to deal with other soulful things like death.
The next one says, my mum is nearly 80 with health problems and I can't stop playing her future funeral over and over. How do I deal with this? I think this is such a big one for people. Feeling almost guilty or like it's a terrible thing to be imagining the future and imagining such a scene like a funeral.
I mean, but it's also wise because it is likely. You know, her mum has less ahead of her than behind her. And so the first person to have a conversation with would be her mum, to talk to her mum, to say, I love you and I am worried about you dying. What are you worried about, mum? What do you want for your funeral? Actually facing the reality, always we feel calmer than when we push the reality away where it gets bigger.
Julia, thank you. That was so helpful and really, really interesting. Really appreciate your wisdom on it.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me, Fearne.
If you took a lot from that conversation, then please do subscribe for more chats like this. We've got a whole host of different subjects. And if you've got anything you want to say, Any thoughts or feelings you want to share, then please do pop them in the comments below.